Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. This is Coach Elliott, coming to you live from my basement. You should be able to tell that it's mine because there's a lot of workout equipment behind me that I don't use anymore. Anyway, welcome to the first day of the rest of the school year in what I am already documenting as the strangest year of my life. And we've still got like 75% of it to go. So, what are we going to be doing over the next few weeks? First off, please note that I am rocking the quarantine cut. Didn't really think about having to record lessons for people. I shaved my head and said, I won't see anybody for like a month, so it doesn't matter what my hair looks like. And then I remembered that I needed to record myself for everybody to see me. So, poor planning on my part, and let's hope that doesn't become a theme over the next few weeks. My plan right now is to film these lessons, put them up on Google Classroom, keep everything going through Google Classroom for the rest of the school year. We'll record some lessons. I'll have some assignments put up on there. I'll grade the assignments you put on Google Classroom. We'll go from there. They're wanting us, I say they, administration, the school board wants us to do Google Meets, which is, some teachers use Zoom. I think I'm going to use Google Meet over the next few weeks. Just in case you have any questions about anything, things like that, I'll have more information about that. Google is supposed to do an update on Google Meet at the start of next week. So my plan right now is to let you know something about that at the start of next week when I kind of film the next lesson that I'm planning on doing with you. If you have any questions before then, if you want to ask me anything at all, you can reach out to me on Google Classroom, or you can email me at Troy_Elliott. That's ELLIOTT, 2 L's and 2 T's, Troy_Elliott at ecboe.org. I'll put that up on the Google Classroom as well. Type that out for you. If you have any questions about whatever, if you want to email me, I can usually get back to your emails pretty quick. And then by the time we do the lesson for next week, I'll have a Google Meet set up, and that's going to work during your class times. So whenever you would normally be in my class, for example, if you're in, say, 5th period, that was a class that met on Tuesdays and Thursdays back when we used to have school. And so we'll meet in there sometime between 11 and 12, which was when your class time would normally be. 6th period would meet on a Wednesday or Friday. So I'll have more details for you on that next week. I'll have a schedule put up and everything. We'll do that. So the short story that we're looking at today, which is mainly what we're going to be looking at over the next few weeks. We're going to have some short stories. We're going to look at some poetry. We're going to have some writing assignments, things like that. The short story we're looking at today is by Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt Vonnegut is I was looking over at my bookshelf to see if I had I have a copy of Slaughterhouse-Five somewhere, which is his most well-known work. But he's produced a lot more. He wrote a short story called, a novel called Cat's Cradle that is very good as well. One of my favorite stories, one of my favorite books. If you get bored over the next few weeks, reading would be a great way to try to apply yourself. This story that we're looking at, it offers a little bit of commentary on the world. It offers a little bit of an analysis of the world as he sees it. It's a dystopian world, which is something we've talked about a lot before, which is some sort of look at the future, in this case 2081, where everything is kind of gone to crap. There's some ruling class that is suppressing humanity in some way. A lot of times dystopian worlds, and it's an example in this story as well, dystopian worlds are supposed to be perceived as something good, but in reality they are something bad. You saw that when we read The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. You saw that when we looked at The Lottery. and certainly some other stories that we looked at that kind of escape me right now. So we'll go through Harrison Bergeron, which is the story for today. There's a link on Google Classroom for you to follow along. I'm going to read it out loud. I'll stop and kind of collect my thoughts, kind of reset to where we're at right now. And there's some questions for you to answer after this is over. I'm going to go ahead. I'm 5 minutes in, and I'm in this too far to restart at this point. This is not going to be perfect. This is not going to be me being very well spoken. Y'all had me in class for 3/4 of a year. You know that I stop and stumble and have to gather my thoughts from time to time. So it's not going to be any different on a video. I'm not going to edit this to try to win an Oscar or anything. So be patient with me. I'm sure by the end of this that we as teachers will be a lot better at this distance education than we are right now. But we'll start with Harrison Bergeron if you want to follow along, and I'll try to reset and go from time to time and figure out what we're doing, kind of explain the story a little bit better. So Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut. The year was 2081, and everybody was finally equal. They weren't only equal before God and the law. They were equal every which way. Nobody was smarter than anybody else. Nobody was better looking than anybody else. Nobody was stronger or quicker than anybody else. All this equality was due to the 2011th, 2012th, and 2013th Amendments to the Constitution, and to the unceasing vigilance of the agents of the United States Handicapper General. Some things about living still weren't quite right, though. April, for instance, still drove people crazy by not being springtime. And it was in that clammy month that the HG men took George and Hazel Bergeron's 14-year-old son, Harrison, away. It was tragic, all right, but George and Hazel couldn't think about it very hard. Hazel had perfectly average intelligence, which meant that she couldn't think about anything except in short bursts. And George, while his intelligence was way above normal, had a little mental handicap radio in his ear. He was required by law to wear it at all times. It was tuned to a government transmitter. Every 20 seconds or so, the transmitter would send out some sharp noise to keep people like George from taking unfair advantage of their brains. So just to kind of reset and talk about where we're at right now. It's 2081. The government has declared everybody to be equal. And not only have they declared everybody to be equal, they have found a way for everyone to be equal. Nobody is stronger than anybody else. Nobody is faster. Nobody is better looking than anybody else. All right? Which, as you can tell from this video, it's not true. But we finally have equality before God and the law. It's just that the way that they go about enforcing it is not exactly what people intended. Now, when we say equality, we're not talking about equality in terms of you have the same rights as I do. We're not talking about equality as in somebody is treated the same based on race, religion, gender, or any of that. That's not the type of equality we're talking about. Vonnegut, the author here, is offering a commentary on life, but he's not talking about people being seen as equal based on the circumstances that they were born into. He's not talking about equality based on any type of civil right or anything like that. He's talking about equality based on the things people can or can't do. All right? I have every opportunity to make it to the NBA, but I do not have the ability to do that. When you talk about When you're talking about people's intelligence, when you're talking about people's strengths, people's looks, people's ability, it's not all the same. And that's the commentary that Vonnegut is offering here. Now I'm going to pause this video real quick, stop it, I'll edit it all together afterwards because I keep getting text messages and I'm worried somebody's going to call me and screw this up. So I'm going to stop the video and we will restart. There's going to be a weird gap in the video, and then we'll get back to it. And just like I said, I'm back with a weird, awkward pause in the middle of it. Continue on with what I was talking about. George and Hazel are an example of how people are seen as equal. Hazel is seen as average, all right? And as you will see as we read through the story, average in this case means she's a complete idiot. George, on the other hand, is intelligent, but they put a transmitter in his ear that's going to blast some sharp noise every now and then to try to interrupt his thought pattern, so he cannot take unfair advantage of his brain. George and Hazel had a son, Harrison, that was taken away when he was 14 years old, and we'll find out more about Harrison as the story goes on. He is, the title of the story, so there would have to be some reference. Continuing on. George and Hazel were watching television. There were tears on Hazel's cheeks, but she'd forgotten for the moment what they were about. On the television screen were ballerinas. A buzzer sounded in George's head. His thoughts fled in panic, like bandits from a burglar alarm. "That was a pretty dance, that dance they just did," said Hazel. "Huh," said George. "That dance. It was nice," said Hazel. "Yup," said George. He tried to think about the ballerinas. They weren't really very good, no better than anyone else would have been anyway. They were burdened with sash weights and bags of birdshot, and their faces were masked, so that no one, seeing a free and graceful gesture or a pretty face, should feel like something the cat drug in. George was toying with the vague notion that maybe the dancers shouldn't be handicapped, but he didn't get very far with it before another noise in his ear radio scattered his thoughts. George winced. So did 2 out of the 8 ballerinas. So they're watching a ballet on television, except the ballerinas are weighed down with bags of birdshot and sash weights, and they've got masks on their face so that nobody can see how good looking they are. All right? This is another way of trying to treat everyone like they're the same, in spite of the fact that obviously they are not. All right? It would be a lot like watching a basketball game. Basketball is this sport we used to have. They had this big open court, and there were baskets they would try to throw the ball into. It'd be trying to watch one of those games where people aren't as skilled as everybody else. Okay, I don't want to watch a sport where people have the same ability as me. I want to watch the best of the best compete. But in this world, in the world of Harrison Bergeron, this dystopian world, we have a time where we have made everyone the same so that nobody feels left out, so that nobody feels like they're less than. So George winces when the thought goes through his mind of people, maybe they shouldn't be handicapped. Loud noise goes off, and he winces. Hazel sees that. Hazel saw him wince. Having no mental handicap herself, she had to ask George what the latest sound had been. "Sounded like somebody hitting a milk bottle with a ball-peen hammer," said George. "I think it'd be real interesting hearing all the different sounds," said Hazel, a little envious. "All the things they think up." Said George. "Only, if I was handicapper general, you know what I would do," said Hazel. Hazel, as a matter of fact, bore a strong resemblance to the handicapper general, a woman named Diana Moon Glampers. "If I was Diana Moon Glampers," said Hazel, "I'd have chimes on Sunday. Just chimes. Kind of in honor of religion." "I could think if it was just chimes," said George. "Well, maybe make 'em real loud," said Hazel. "I think I'd make a good handicapper general." "Good as anybody else," said George. "Who knows better than I do what normal is?" said Hazel. "Right," said George. He began to think glimmeringly about his abnormal son, who was now in jail, about Harrison, but a 21-gun salute in his head stopped that. "Boys," said Hazel, "that was a doozy, wasn't it?" It was such a doozy that George was white and trembling, and tears stood on the rims of his red eyes. 2 of the 8 ballerinas had collapsed to the studio floor, were holding their temples. "All of a sudden you look so tired," said Hazel. "Why don't you stretch out on the sofa so you can rest your handicap bag on the pillows, honey bunch?" She was referring to the 47 pounds of birdshot in a canvas bag, which was padlocked around George's neck. "Go on and rest the bag for a little while," she said. "I don't care if you're not equal to me for a while." George weighed the bag with his hands. "I don't mind it," he said. "I don't notice it anymore. It's just a part of me." "You've been so tired lately. Kind of wore out," said Hazel. "If there was just some way we could make a little hole in the bottom of the bag and take out just a few of them lead balls. Just a few. 2 years in prison and $2,000 fine for every ball I take out," said George. "I don't call that a bargain." "If you could just take out a few when you come home from work," said Hazel. "I mean, you don't compete with anybody around here. You just sit around." "If I tried to get away with it," said George, "then other people would get away with it. And pretty soon we'd be back in the Dark Ages again, with everybody competing against everybody else. You wouldn't like that, would you?" "I'd hate it," said Hazel. "There you are," said George. "The minute people start cheating on laws, what do you think happens to society?" So, this is another characteristic of a dystopian type world, where the people inside it have accepted that whatever is going on is the right way to do things. George, in spite of the fact that he's wearing 47 pounds around his neck, in spite of the fact that he's got a radio in his ear that's buzzing every few minutes to try to keep him from thinking, in spite of all that, he thinks that it's right because it keeps people from competing against everybody. And it keeps people equal. Hazel obviously wouldn't like this because she is, as I said before, an idiot. Continuing on. If Hazel hadn't been able to come up with an answer to this question, George couldn't have supplied one. A siren was going off in his head. "Reckon it'd all fall apart," said Hazel. "What would?" said George blankly. "Society," said Hazel uncertainly. "Wasn't that what you just said?" "Who knows," said George. The television program was suddenly interrupted for a news bulletin. It wasn't clear at first as to what the bulletin was about, since the announcer, like all announcers, had a serious speech impediment. For about half a minute, and in a state of high excitement, the announcer tried to say, "Ladies and gentlemen." So we have people with speech impediments that are doing our news and offering our news bulletins, our emergency news breaks. Okay? Again, nothing wrong with that. With those people having those speech impediments, they can live full lives. They don't get to read the news. I'm sorry. He finally gave up and handed the bulletin to a ballerina to read. "That's all right," Hazel said of the announcer. "He tried. That's the big thing. He tried the best he could with what God gave him. He should get a nice raise for trying so hard." "Ladies and gentlemen," said the ballerina, reading the bulletin. She must have been extraordinarily beautiful, because the mask she wore was hideous. And it was easy to see that she was the strongest and most graceful of all the dancers, for her handicap bags were as big as those worn by 200-pound men. And she had to apologize at once for her voice, which was a very unfair voice for a woman to use. Her voice was a warm, luminous, timeless melody. "Excuse me," she said, and began again, making her voice absolutely uncompetitive. So now I'm going to try to read this as this woman would read the news bulletin if she was trying to sound uncompetitive. Now, this may be awkward. This may sound ridiculous. Y'all may all make fun of me for this, and that's fine, because I'm not going to see you for like another 4 or 5 months, and you'll have forgotten about it by then until you look back at this video. I'm going to do what I want anyway, because I've been pretty bored with my life for the last couple weeks. "Harrison Bergeron, age 14, she said in a grackle squawk, has just escaped from jail where he was held on suspicion of plotting to overthrow the government. He is a genius and an athlete, is under-handicapped, and should be regarded as extremely dangerous." A police photograph of Harrison Bergeron was flashed on the screen upside down, then sideways, upside down again, then right side up. The picture showed the full length of Harrison against a background calibrated in feet and inches. He was exactly 7 feet tall. The rest of Harrison's appearance was Halloween in hardware. No one had ever borne heavier handicaps. He had outgrown hindrances faster than the HG men could think of them. Instead of a little ear radio for a mental handicap, he wore a tremendous pair of headphones and spectacles with thick, wavy lenses. The spectacles were intended to make him not only half blind, but also give him wanging headaches besides. Scrap metal was hung all over him. Ordinarily, there was a certain symmetry, a military neatness to the handicaps issued to strong people, but Harrison looked like a walking junkyard. In the race of life, Harrison carried 300 pounds. And to offset his good looks, the HG men required that he wear at all times a red rubber ball for a nose, keep his eyebrows shaved off, and color his even white teeth with black caps at snaggletooth random. "If you see the boy," said the ballerina, "do not, I repeat, do not try to reason with him." So what we have here is Harrison Bergeron, the title of the story, the daughter of George and Hazel, who are watching this on television. He is the most handicapped person that they have ever had. He's the most handicapped person on the planet. His face is hideous, so he wears this big rubber ball of a nose. His eyebrows are shaved off. He wears thick, wavy glasses so he can't see. He's 7 foot tall. He wears 300 pounds of scrap metal strapped to him at random. They've done everything they can to try to make this man the most handicapped person on the planet, because he is physically, he is mentally, he is the best of the best. And he has escaped captivity. All right? There was a shriek of a door being torn from its hinges. Screams and barking cries of consternation came from the television set. The photograph of Harrison Bergeron on the screen jumped again and again, as though dancing to the tune of an earthquake. George Bergeron correctly identified the earthquake, and well he might have, for many was the time his own home had danced to the same crashing tune. "My God," said George, "that must be Harrison." The realization was blasted from his mind instantly by the sound of an automobile collision in his head. When George could open his eyes again, the photograph of Harrison was gone. A living, breathing Harrison filled the screen. Clanking, clownish and huge, Harrison stood in the center of the studio. The knob of the uprooted studio door was still in his hand. Ballerinas, technicians, musicians, and announcers cowered on their knees before him, expecting to die. "I'm the Emperor," cried Harrison. "Do you hear? I'm the Emperor. Everybody must do what I say at once." He stamped his foot, and the studio shook. "Even as I stand here," he bellowed, "crippled, hobbled, and sickened, I am a greater ruler than any man who has ever lived. Now watch me become what I can become." Harrison tore the straps of his handicap harness like wet tissue paper, tore straps guaranteed to support 5,000 pounds. Harrison's scrap iron handicaps crashed to the floor. Harrison thrust his thumbs under the bar of the padlock that secured his head harness. The bar snapped like celery. Harrison smashed his headphones and spectacles against the wall. He flung away his rubber ball nose and revealed a man that would have awed Thor, the god of thunder. "I shall now select my empress," he said, looking down on the cowering people. "Let the first woman who dares rise to her feet claim her mate and her throne." A moment passed, and then a ballerina arose, swaying like a willow. Harrison plucked the mental handicap from her ear, snapping her physical handicaps with marvelous delicacy. Last of all, he removed her mask. She was blindingly beautiful. "Now," said Harrison, taking her hand, "shall we show the people the meaning of the word dance? Music," he commanded. The musicians scrambled back into their chairs, and Harrison stripped them of their handicaps too. "Play your best," he told them, "and I'll make you barons and dukes and earls." The music began. It was normal at first. Cheap, silly, false. But Harrison snatched two musicians from their chairs, waved them like batons as he sang the music as he wanted it played. He slammed them back into their chairs. The music began again, and was much improved. Harrison and his empress merely listened to the music for a while, listened gravely, as though synchronizing their heartbeats to it. They shifted their weights to their toes. Harrison placed his big hands on the girl's tiny waist, letting her sense the weightlessness that would soon be hers. And then, in an explosion of grace and joy, into the air they sprang. Not only were the laws of the land abandoned, but the laws of gravity and the laws of motion as well. They reeled, whirled, swiveled, flounced, capered, gambled, and spun. They leaped like deer on the moon. The studio ceiling was 30 feet high, but each leap brought the dancers nearer to it. It became their obvious intention to kiss the ceiling. They kissed it. And then, neutral in gravity, with love and pure will, they remained suspended in air inches below the ceiling. And they kissed each other for a long, long time. So let's kind of catch back up on everything. Harrison Bergeron, the most gifted man to ever live, breaks into the room, strips off all of his handicaps, and they began to dance. They began to show the world what they can do, to show the world just how unequally gifted they are compared to everybody else. Now, you may ask yourself, if Harrison Bergeron is so intelligent, why is he doing this? Why is he proclaiming himself the emperor? He seems like he's gone crazy. And in that regard, you are probably right. Probably the stress of the life that he has lived has caused him to do that. Well, how is he able to leap 30 feet into the air? How is he able to kiss the ceiling, and how are they able to remain there? Well, there you have to kind of use your imagination a little bit. You have to realize that this is just showing to display how the world has suppressed Harrison, how the world has pushed him down, and now he's getting to show what he can really do. And you may ask yourself, you may say, self. That doesn't make any sense. And I would remind you the importance of the suspension of disbelief, the fact that this is a story. None of this actually happened. Okay, although it is in the year 2081, I suppose that it possibly could. It would be this very strange coincidence. But remember that you're reading a story here. Remember to kind of suspend that disbelief and analyze everything that's happened. And what has happened is that Harrison has shown up on camera. He has selected the most beautiful ballerina that he can, and they have displayed what they are capable of to the world. It was then that Diana Moon Glampers, the handicapper general, came into the studio with a double-barreled 10-gauge shotgun. She fired twice, and the emperor and empress were dead before they hit the floor. Diana Moon Glampers loaded the gun again. She aimed it at the musicians and told them they had 10 seconds to get their handicaps back on. It was then that the Bergeron's television tube burned out. Hazel turned to comment about the blackout to George, but George had gone into the kitchen for a can of beer. George came back with the beer, paused while the handicap signal shook him up, and then he sat down again. "You've been crying," he said to Hazel. "Yup," she said. "What about?" he said. "I forget," she said. "Something real sad on television." "What was it?" he said. "It's all kinds of mixed up in my mind," said Hazel. "Forget sad things," said George. "I always do," said Hazel. "That's my girl," said George. He winced. There was the sound of a riveting gun in his head. "Gee, I could tell that one was a doozy," said Hazel. "You can say that again," said George. "Gee," said Hazel, "I could tell that one was a doozy." That concludes the story. Now, Harrison Bergeron is about equality, although as we already talked about, it's not equality based on things that people should have equal access to. This isn't equality based on the color of your skin or whether you're a man or a woman or any of these other things that people have fought for equality for. It's not that type of commentary. It's commentary, it's Kurt Vonnegut's commentary on a world where we try to make everybody seem as equal as they possibly can be, and in reality, It's just not that way. I would like to imagine what I would think my handicaps would look like. I would obviously need probably at least 300 pounds to strength-wise make me equal to everyone else. I would probably need the most hideous mask that people could make. Although, according to my wife, this haircut probably gets the job done just as easy. So that's what the story's about. That is Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut. There are some questions on your Google Classroom related to the story. If you could answer those and get those turned in, I would appreciate it. I'm going to try to do around a short story a week, maybe a little bit more. I would recommend you download the Google Classroom app. That way you get alerts when I put things on there. I'm enjoying this. It's a chance to get to do something a little bit different outside of the quarantine. I hope you enjoy it as well. If not, you're stuck with me till the end of the school year anyway. You can move on to another teacher next year who maybe when we have another global pandemic will handle things better than I do. But I appreciate you taking the time to watch this. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. We'll set up some Google Meets next week. And see y'all when I see you.